Good morning, everybody, and welcome to 360 Church at the Shattuck Cinemas. It's great to have you with us today. You will notice on the little arm by your seat that there is a card that looks just like this, and it's the same one you see every week if you've visited with us before. But there's something new on the back. Matthew's going to mention this later as well. I just want to bring your attention to it. There are 3 questions on the back that we would love to have your anonymous response to. Now, if you actually are visiting today, maybe you have to fill out a separate one of these so it's anonymous. But grab one of these and fill them out. And basically the questions are about what you're thinking about in your life. What do I wonder about? What do I worry about? What do I wish for? And if you could just jot down a word or two or a sentence, this would really help us. We're in the process of reevaluating everything that we do as a church. And one of the things we want to do with our Sunday mornings and other ministry is making sure that we are scratching where it is itching. So having some sense of kind of what's going on in your head and in your life on an anonymous basis helps us to make sure that we're focused in the right way. And we're not aiming resources and time and so forth at things that aren't really intersecting with where you're living. So as I said, Matt will mention that again in a moment. There's a handy pen, every other seat out there. And this gives you something to do during the sermon too, so that's the extra fringe benefit. So grab that right away. Don't let that opportunity go by, because it's only going to happen a couple of times for you. I love courtroom dramas. Do you like courtroom dramas? Lawyers, clashing, defense, testimony, all that stuff. Blood spatter, CSI, the whole thing. It's great. I love them all. I fell in love with these as a child. Watching an ancient black and white drama called Perry Mason. Has anyone ever seen that? Reruns? Yes, thank you, Tina. God bless you. Yeah, and I followed it all the way through to the Law and Order franchises, many of them, including Law and Order UK, which in my view is the best of them all, in the late 20th and early 21st century, and that brings us right up to today. As a kid, I had never actually met a lawyer, but I just thought they were so cool on old-style 3-channel, what they now call antenna television. I just thought they were just so awesome, and really got infatuated with the whole idea. And what I like about the genre is that it is so given to surprising, dramatic turns. In fact, the Law and Order franchise is famous for this, the plot twist, and it is given to turns which can happen just instantaneously. Now, my favorite of those is the one where, under cross-examination, browbeating questioning by one of the attorneys, a witness who's in the dock suddenly breaks down sobbing or shouting and starts blurting out all kinds of crazy stuff, like a confession to a killing or some new fact in evidence that just pulls the whole trial sort of inside out and restarts everything. And the gallery gasps, and when you pan to the jury, their hands are up over their face like they can't believe this person said this horrifying thing. And the poor judge attempts to get order by saying something like, the jury will disregard the witness's testimony. And if he or she is really leaning hard on it, they'll say, and it will be stricken from the record. Like that's going to happen. I mean, there are certain things that once you have heard them, you cannot unhear them. You can pull out the nail, but you can't pull out the hole, as they say. And the poor jury is left in this position of trying to la 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 la. In this regard, this month we're doing a really simple series of talks called Jesus in His Own Words, and the idea is to let Jesus say things to us that we cannot unhear. You can strike something from a hard copy record, but once you've heard it, you cannot unhear it. And so we're simply letting Him speak for Himself. The first week we talked about Jesus, our Savior, and how rather than us pursuing God, He has come for us in the form of His Son. And then last week we talked about water baptism, Jesus' own baptism, how He's totally identified with us. And then we went to our house and we had a fabulous water baptism service and a wonderful outdoor picnic in our backyard, and we gave our dog a big beef bone, and he was happy, and it was fantastic. Today we're going to drop into Jesus' life again in the 13th chapter of John, and we're going to overhear, almost fly on the wall, so to speak, one of those moments when He says some things that you just can't unhear. Now, we're near the end of His life. We're in the city of Jerusalem. He's meeting for the last time for a Passover dinner with His 12 closest disciples. And when the door is closed, the story becomes 3D in John chapter 13. He washes their feet, and they protest. He predicts that one of them will betray him, and they protest. He announces, I'm leaving and you can't come with me, and they protest. Now, unlike the Da Vinci painting, the Last Supper is really a rolling argument between Jesus and the disciples, where he says these things and they say, no, that couldn't be the way. Have you ever thought of it that way? And so the thing that really sets them off is he says, oh, and by the way, in addition to all the other stuff that I have taught you, I'm out of here. I'm leaving and you can't go with me. And in the same verse in John 13, he says, oh, and by the way, there's a new commandment too. I want you to love one another now. No more of that who's the greatest business. Love one another now. And that's how people are going to know in the long run that you're my disciples. But they don't do jack about that because it's wrapped in this announcement that he is about to disappear. And there's nothing they can do about it. And there is nothing they can do to go with him. I'm leaving. The jury will disregard the testimony of Jesus about his disappearance, and we'll begin to work on this whole love issue. Not going to happen. And so Peter, always wanted to poke the tiger through the bars, says, okay, where are you going? And no matter where it is, I want you to know that I am going to go with you. And Jesus says, not only are you not going with me now, but you're going to deny me 3 times before you even leave town. I mean, this isn't going to work out for you at all. And so responding to Peter's question from chapter 13, where are you going? Chapter 14 opens this way. Let not your heart be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me, for in my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am you may be also. And you know the way to where I am going. Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you're going. How can we know the way? Jesus said to him, I am the way, and the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. Now, the core of what cannot be unheard here is in verse 3, where he says, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that I may be with you always. I'm leaving you as a suffering servant. In just a few moments, you're going to watch me arrested. You're going to watch me dragged before the authorities illegally, convicted, tried, beaten, mocked, pierced, nailed to a cross between 2 criminals. You're never going to meet anybody who looks less like a king than me. And you're going to see that all within just the next few hours. But after I rise again and I've ascended into heaven, Jesus is implying here, and I'm seated at the right hand of the Father, and I am in place as your great high priest, you're going to know what the angels will mean when they say this at my ascension. This Jesus who was taken up from you into heaven will come in the same way as you saw him go into heaven. In other words, I'm leaving, I'm going to prepare a place, I'm coming back for you, and I'm going to take you there so we can be together. It's the second coming in Jesus' own words. Now, the whole idea of the second coming brings with it a whole lot of baggage. There are tribulations and millennia, there are angels, there are trumpets, there are vials, there are bowls. There's the whole book of Revelation and all the mysteries contained there, and then the even greater mystery of the huge number of incredibly bad movies that have made to represent the entire end times situation. Now, we're going to deal with all of that, not so much the movies, but the other stuff on another day. Well, we'll take a whole month to look at all of that. But the truth of the matter is this. Everybody has a theory of the end. The only question is which one you have. One observer has called this a personal eschatology. Eschatology, the study of end things. Everybody has a personal eschatology, regardless of the complexities of figuring out the theology of it all and the many competing schools of thought which we'll take a survey of in days to come. You've got one sitting there. What is your theory of how all this ends? It could be that after death, there's nothing. That's a theory that's well known and pretty popular. It could be that life is part of a cycle, and that after this cycle, there will be another one, and then another one after that. It could be that at the end of all this, you're going to stand in front of someone for a time of judgment that's going to be about how good or bad you were in this world. It could be that your personal eschatology is that there will be an apocalypse of some kind that will wipe everything out, will pull the plug on the universe, like 2012 or the day after. Or maybe a near-Earth asteroid is going to come and do to us what it looks like one of them did to the dinosaurs long ago, and everything will be over. What's your personal eschatology? How does it all end for you? Now, that question makes it really easy to sympathize with Thomas, who is the one in verse 5 who says to Jesus, what do you mean you're leaving? Leaving? After we've given up, he's implying, we've given up everything to be with you, and we don't even know where you're going or even how to get there. His question kind of symbolizes all the doubts and uncertainties that swirl around this issue of Christ's return. So our question in this series is not how to make sense of all of the different theories and all of those sorts of things, but to ask the question, what did Jesus say in his own words? Right. Not what all the theologians saying, those are our fallible people, but what do the authoritative words of Jesus tell us? And in the New Testament, there are a lot of words about this. In fact, one verse in every 26 in the New Testament has some bearing on the second coming of Christ. What we're going to do today is keep it simple by using these first few verses at the beginning of John 14. And this isn't the only way you could organize this, but I think it's one useful way. Let's use these first 5 verses as, if you will, the sun around which the planets will orbit. And all of the other things can just orbit around this one statement by Jesus for today. I'm leaving. I'm going to prepare a place. I'm coming back. I'm coming back for you, and we are going to be there forever. That's the end of things according to Jesus. The jury will disregard the witness's statement. In verse 1 of chapter 14, he's still responding to Peter's question, where are you going? And he gives the key to dealing with the emotional pushback from that when he says, don't let your heart be troubled by this. Believe in God, believe in me. And when he utters these words, what he's really saying is, when you have believed in me, you've believed in God. He's saying that the two of us, God, me, there's no daylight there. So when I've told you something, Jesus is saying, God has told you that thing. And in this way, he identifies himself with God in a powerful way, in a life-changing way, in a way that stills troubled hearts. You know, sometimes it's not that our troubles are so big, it's that our sense of who God is too little. And he's available to help us in those things. And when we hear Jesus, we hear God in his own words. In verse 2, he talks about the place he's going. He calls it my Father's house. And he says it has a lot of rooms. You know, in the King James version, the word that was originally used there was mansions. And so a lot of Christians over the years have thought of heaven as sort of, what would we call it? Rodeo Drive with angels, Beverly Hills, the Berkeley Hills, it was very high-end real estate, essentially. But it really just means a residence. And in Jewish literature of the day, this term is used often by Jewish scholars to describe the idea of abiding or remaining, being close to someone because I live in that place. So Jesus coming isn't just about trumpets and bowls, it's about us being together. Because that's what he wants more than anything else. That's what it's all been about, to be with you. That's why it doesn't make any sense for us to climb up some system of merit to God. He has come to us in Christ because he wants to be with you. And he values you so much, he was willing to die for that to be possible, to be with you forever. Now, what this says to me is that history is linear. In other words, that our concept of history as a set of cycles, that where we're constantly repeating things, it is made obsolete by Jesus, by his first coming and his second coming. Tells me that there is one timeline that's governing the universe. It has a beginning, it has a middle, it has an end, inaugurated by Christ, brought to a conclusion by Christ, and there is a straight line in between with no instant replays, no recycling, and no penalty shots. The question becomes, where do I stand in him now? Well, why is that important? It's important because it's a source of hope. You know, I've been watching this tragic news story unfold about the shoot down of the Malaysian Airlines Flight 17, the eastern side of Ukraine. I think the whole world's heart's been broken again by this, and the horrific violence it represents, and the swirling uncertainty that surrounds it, and the political complexities that just seem to be. I was watching some of the coverage, and my heart just sank.
Yeah.
Just sank. And you could see these kind of things, and the big question is, who gave the order to fire the missile? I did. And you did. And we all have. Because we have created the world in which that kind of thing is possible. And as long as this world is run by humans like us, some better than others, but all human, events like that in some form will always be possible. The only hope for the planet that can come out of that is somebody showing up to change things. That we're not doomed to simply endlessly repeat, like CNN on a repeat loop, over and over, tragedy after bloodbath, after massacre, after tragedy, after bloodbath, after massacre. Somebody's got to show up and say, school's out, that's it. There's not going to be any more. We're going to change everything, and all of that you've known and mourned over is going to go away. And the only person who can do that is the one who's gone to the Father to prepare a place for us. In verse 3, he says, I will come again. In 18 of verse 14, he says, I won't leave you as orphans. I will come again. It's pretty plain. He's not talking about just Easter or the coming of the Holy Spirit on the day of Pentecost, but he's speaking pretty specifically of a visible, personal appearance. In other words, just in Jesus' first advent, as he appears personally, visibly, physically, his second advent makes sense that it would be exactly the same way, that he's going to come in that fashion. In fact, in Matthew 24, he said it this way. You know the way the lightning looks when it flashes from the east to the west? That's what it'll be like. I'm not going to show up all apologetic with my hat in my hand. It's boom, and I'm there. I'm going to come back and bring you to myself. Now, history is not only linear because of Christ's return. The second thing it does is history becomes scarce. You know, did you ever think of it this way? The supply of history available to us is not infinite. We're going to run out of it at a certain point. Time will simply be up. And the supply of history we have available to work within is going to be exhausted. Our opportunities to serve him and to serve other people and to do something about things like the shoot down of that Malaysian air flight, to be involved and engaged in the world, to love people, to serve people, to correct evil, to right wrongs, all of those opportunities happen in history, and they are all finite because of the return of the Lord. I realized when I was working on this talk, I have thought about the second coming of Jesus once this year. I mean, do you think about it? Dang, what if he came back before I graduated? Or before geez, he could come back before I had a chance to get married, or before I got my first promotion, or it could be really inconvenient. I worked so hard to get this far. And as I began to look at these passages, I thought to myself, this is so central to his teaching, and I am living like it is not even on the margins of it. I'm living like we're in a perpetual, ongoing forever, but we're not. History is not surplus. It's not infinite. It's scarce. And when its end comes, our opportunities to do right in this planet will be gone with it. And it made me wonder, if I knew Jesus was coming next Tuesday, how would I live the next 2 days? Probably not the way I'm living now. Have you ever seen a greyhound race on TV? It's kind of like a horse race, but with greyhound dogs. And there's one key difference between it and racing thoroughbred horses. When the greyhounds start racing, there is a mechanical device called a rabbit. It actually looks like a rabbit that's released from the starting gates and goes around the track on the inside just ahead of the fastest dog. And when the dogs are released and they're trained to spring out of the cages and run, how fast they run. It's very fast. The whole pack chases this mechanical rabbit. And people bet millions of dollars on the outcome of dogs chasing a little piece of metal covered with fur. They chase the whole thing around the whole distance of the track. And as this image flashed in my mind this week, I thought, this is how we are living. Running in a circle, going really fast, but where are we going? If I lift up my eyes and understand that the eastern sky could part at any time and Jesus could appear, not in the pictures like on the internet where he's sort of a white hipster in a white bathrobe and he comes through the clouds. I mean the real Jesus. He shows up in power and authority and like a king and a monarch reigning in the universe. All of a sudden, I'm not the greyhound, I'm the rabbit. Don't be a greyhound. Don't chase a bunch of nonsense that doesn't make any difference in the world. Live today like this is the last day that any of us had to live. Because one day, we are going to be at that point. The calendar is going to turn over and there will be no more dates. An alarm that is not set in your phone but set in heaven will go off. And that will be it. Jesus said, you know where I'm going, and the reason you know is because I personally am the way, the truth, and the light. History is linear. History is scarce, and history is open. In other words, when Jesus shows up, history becomes not like a brass dome that sits on top of us, but the whole system opens up, and everyone who has died in the faith before this time is called out of the grave, raised from the dead. The visible reign of God begins on the earth. People who have loved the Lord receive reward. Those who are far away from him stand in front of a great white throne. In the book of Revelation says, books are opened. And not even Perry Mason will be any help that day. The hope that we get from that is that Jesus alone can deliver us from the power of sin and death in bringing the visible reign of God to earth. Perhaps all the debate and confusion and all the terrible movies are really because we are so obsessed with the format of the second coming, we have forgotten about its function. And its function is just one thing. History is linear, it's scarce, it's open, but all of that comes down to just one thing. The second coming of Christ is about hope. It's about something outside me, something bigger than me, something supernatural. It puts my life in a context of meaning and purpose that nothing else can supply it, because I'm looking forward to the day where there is a finish line that's more than a gold watch and a trip to Tahiti paid for out of my retirement account. When I don't wake up 2 divorces and 3 houses at Tahoe from now and say, I've been the greyhound. The first time he arrives with a baby's whimper. The second time with the bang of the judge's gavel. The first time he arrives after centuries of prediction. The second time like a thief in the night. The first time he is pursued by a king. The second time he comes as the king. The first time he lays in a manger. The second time he sits on a throne. The first time he's judged by people. The second time he comes to judge people. The first time he is a servant of all. The second time he is the sovereign of all. The first time he dies and is buried. The second time he calls the dead out of their tombs. The first time to proclaim the kingdom. The second time to install the kingdom of God. The jury will disregard the testimony of the witness. Lord, we thank you for giving us hope today in the form of your Son, for what he has done for us in his first coming, and we thank you for what he will do for us when he comes again. We thank you that in him we don't have a religion, but we have deliverance from death, deliverance from the power of the grave. We have a way of thinking about our life and living in a way that we're not the greyhounds. Just chasing around and around, but we're going somewhere. and we're going towards you. Lord God, we ask you today that you would just make this, by your Holy Spirit, something we can't unhear. Help us, God. Put that inside us. Give us ears to hear. To live like your coming isn't a theory, but that it's a reality. Not some strange apocalyptic film, but some real live historical event. We just love you that you're coming for us. Not to do things to us, but you're coming to be with us. Man, we just love you for that. Nobody else talks to us like that. Just you. Holy Spirit, come now and just speak into our hearts. If you'd stand with me, please. Our band is going to lead us in some worship at this time. We ask you to just open your heart and just receive whatever the Lord would have for you during these few moments. And a few of us will be up at the front here if you have a need that you'd like to receive prayer for, especially if there's just something where you need hope, something in your life where the situation is bigger than the hope that you have. We would love to be able to pray with you today, or maybe you've reached out and received Christ by faith for the first time. We'd love to pray with you about that today as well, or you can just indicate that on the Connect card when we pass those in a little bit later. Just a few minutes, we'll share communion together. But until that time, let's just open our hearts up. Just tell the Lord that we love him. If you don't know who he is, just let the music just kind of flow through you. Just feel it in your heart. Let him speak to you.